for a week, I would guess. Um, but to start off with, Lee, some of you will know Lee. He's been in the club quite a few years now. I've done quite a few runs with Lee over the years and chatted away about what he does, and uh, was genuinely interested when I found out that he was doing what I hope will turn out to be a very interesting bit of research on COVID. Now, some of you might remember for a couple of years, we had this thing called COVID knocking about. It's been superseded in the news a bit recently. Doesn't seem to be quite so interesting anymore. But I did sit and listen to the news tonight and hear that actually we've got more cases of COVID at the minute than we've ever had. There are 9,500 cases reported today, 2,100 people in hospital, 31 in intensive care, and 11,000 people have died from it in Scotland. But what some of you might not know is there's quite a research community of scientists within Carnethy, and Lee's one of them. And I thought it'd be just quite interesting to just hear a bit about what some of Carnethy have been done in helping us continue running and generally for us surviving, not so lucky for others. So without any more, I'll pass you on to Lee and he can tell us what he wants to tell him in his own special way, hopefully. We'll have a quick break and then we'll go on to Sabrina. So over to you, Lee.
Well, thank you, Mark. Let me just get my slides up. Okay, can you see that, Mark? Is that okay?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Mark, for inviting me to speak. Mark does have weird tastes, so I hope you find it interesting what I'm going to say today. I've always wanted to give a talk to one of these winter talks, and I wish it was for some amazing running feat, but I guess we've got Sabrina for that later. What I'm going to do is talk to you about some of the work we've been doing on COVID-19 with a bias to the work that's being led from Edinburgh. And I guess it's quite good timing because it's 2 years just about this today or tomorrow, I think, when lockdown started. And so it's a good time to look back over the last 2 years and kind of see how far we've come. So I work for Edinburgh University at a place called the Clinical Research Facility. And this is a joint facility between the university and NHS Lothian for doing clinical research. And we've got a facility at the Royal Hospital, one in the sick kids, and then one at the Western General, which is where I work. And my role is in genetics. So I'm interested in why the role of genes in why some people are healthy and some people get sick. So, like I said, 2 years ago, lockdown started and our work closed down like everybody else's. All the nurses that work in our clinical research facility were redeployed to frontline services to help with all the extra COVID work. Our building itself was handed back to the NHS. And it became a haematology day ward for people with blood cancers. And for my team, we stopped all our genomics research and then just focused on COVID-19, trying to answer the question, why do some people get very sick from COVID and other people don't get so sick? And I guess the first question then to ask is, why do we think genes have a role? And there's lots of different evidence why this is the case. And when we're looking to see if the effect of something is genetic or environmental, often we like to go to either twin studies or adoption studies. And this on the left is an old paper, an old adoption paper, where it showed that if your parents died of an infectious disease, even if you were adopted and didn't live with them, had a completely different environment, you were 5 times more likely to also die of an infectious disease. So it shows that genetics has a role to play. And the other bit of evidence, you can see yourself from the coronavirus epidemic, is that there's a whole group of people, the majority of people really, don't get sick from COVID. They're kind of asymptomatic. They have no or very minor symptoms. Then you've got a group of people who've got, a little bit sicker, kind of maybe flu-like symptoms. And then only a very small minority, probably about 1%, get really sick and then need to go to hospital. So it's trying to pull apart, why, which genes are involved and what's happening here. Okay, so to do this, we worked on 2 different studies. I won't go into a great detail about them, apart to say that they were both run locally by a local medic and Professor Kenny Bailey. One is called Genomic, the genetics of mortality in critical care. We've been working on that since 2015, and this is getting DNA from people on in intensive care units and then trying to look at their genes. And the other one is this ISRIC project. This stands for the
Sorry, Lee, you just gone to mute. That was my fault.
Sorry, I'm not muted really, no, you got all that. Okay, so yeah, ISRIC. So this was set up before coronavirus started with the expectation or the chance that there would be a pandemic in the future. So if you're doing clinical research, you need lots of governance and paperwork in place to do that clinical research. So what this project did was say, right, we know there's going to be a pandemic in the future. We don't know what it's going to be. Let's get all the paperwork ready. So as soon as a pandemic starts, we can do clinical research. And over the years, we've seen lots of pandemics come and go, just not as serious as coronavirus. But, you think about the bird flu and swine flu and the SARS in 2002. So these pandemics are kind of known to happen quite often of different seriousness. The first thing ISRIC did was try to get information on this, on the kind of detail of the disease. So when they started 2 years ago, we had absolutely no idea what the disease was, what was happening, who was getting sick and why they were getting sick. So what this project did, the ISRIC project, is they had a ready-to-go questionnaire, which was filled in by the medics at the bedside as people were sick. And then it was uploaded every day to a website hosted in Edinburgh. And this is work done by my colleague Anne-Marie Doherty, and the paper was of the first 20,000 patients. But this was added from day one and then built on. And what it showed was this graph on the left. It kind of shows the ages on the left-hand side, male on the left, female on the right. And what it's showing is that when it first started, that it was a disease that was mainly affecting old people, elderly people, and not the young people. It was affecting males slightly more than females. But what it was showing, this really high death rate. About a third of people who went into hospital at the start of the pandemic died. About a third were discharged, and another third were still in hospital. And so this was giving the fear that the hospitals would just be overrun with patients. And was one of the reasons we went into lockdown. On the right-hand side, there's 2 graphs. The first one is showing what kind of symptoms to look out for. So we had no idea who should be isolating. So cough and fever, shortness of breath, all these things that we're very familiar with now, but at the time we had no idea. Missing from here is the loss of smell and taste that people often get with COVID-19, and that's because that wasn't thought about when they made this questionnaire. So that was added later. And then on the right-hand side is those kind of comorbidities. So trying to work out who should be shielding themselves really, with people who have cardiac disease being the most serious. So this gives a real insight into the disease just from the data of the patients. Okay, so this is my team. Some of my team, and so what we were doing was we were getting bloods from patients in intensive care units across the country, and then extracting the DNA and analysing that. And that's Kirsty with the Morning Post. We were getting the blood samples here in these boxes, and then we were booking them into our system. And then on the bottom is the graph over the last 2 years. Each bar is a week. And so what we saw was this, the start of the pandemic. We've got lots of people in ICU getting their bloods. Then it died off during the summer. As the winter came, it rose again. we had the autumn, winter lockdown. We all got out of lockdown for Christmas and then paid the price. And then ever since, we've had this long tail. And what we do is we get the blood samples, and then we put them on these machines, these automated DNA extraction machines, to get the DNA out of them. Okay, and this is Kirsty, Lorna, and Alan in the lab doing some DNA extractions. And this is my my kind of cartoon of what we're doing here. So if this is a blood sample, your blood's made up of red blood cells and white blood cells. The red blood cells are no interest to us. They just carry the oxygen around the body. It's the white blood cells we're interested. They're the ones that fight the disease. And we're interested in them because they've got a nucleus and they've got DNA in them. And so what we do is we get the blood sample, we add some kind of detergent, like fairy washing up liquid in your washing. It kind of breaks the lipid cell walls, and all the cells explode and put all their cells into the mixture and release their DNA. Then what we can do is we put a big magnet in, and we put a current through it. The magnet is positively charged. DNA is negatively charged, so that attracts all the DNA onto it, kind of sticks onto the magnet. You wash away all the rubbish bits of the cell you don't want. Then you put a fresh buffer in there, turn the magnet off, and the DNA releases into the buffer. And that's how you get nice, clean DNA. And from each individual cell, from one cell, you can get your DNA is like 2 meters long. There's 2 meters of DNA in every cell in your body. Okay, so that's how we get the DNA, and that's kind of what it looks like afterwards. It's like long, stringy bits of cotton. Okay, right. So this next bit is going to be a wee bit sciencey. I can't avoid that. So your DNA is made up of 4 chemicals. We call them bases, and we give them the names A, T, C, and G. And there are 3,000 million of these bases in the human genome, which make up your genome and make you who you are. And people are very, very similar, 99.99% similar. So on average, comparing my DNA to your DNA, there's somewhere in the region of about 3 million bases, points of difference between me and you. Okay, so this is represented here. So we've got some sequence, and at this point there's a T, and in this person there's an A. And what we try and do in genetics is we try and say, right, all these people here, maybe they're really sick with COVID. What genetic variation do they have at this point compared to all the people over here who didn't get sick with COVID, who've got a different variation? And if we find something like that, we can then say, well, this bit of the genome is important and is responsible for that difference. Here we've just got one example, but we look at hundreds of thousands of different bases along the genome and try and work out, is it associated or not associated? So we use lots of computing power to do that. And on the right is the kind of machines we use to do that. We can sequence the DNA, compare it to the human genome to get that variation. Okay. And once we've done that, this is the kind of results we get. So along the bottom is the chromosomes, if they were all laid out end to end. And if you're kind of really zoomed out here, but if you zoomed in, you'd see the A, T, C's, and G's. So this is the start of chromosome 1, and then 2 and 3. You've got 22 chromosomes, and you've got your sex chromosomes. And what we're doing here is trying to find genes which are associated with the disease, and we give them these little codes here. Okay. And this is on the first 5,000 patients we got through the door in September 2020. Within 6 months of the pandemic, we got these results. Since then, we've added more data on. This is another 10,000 people. And we're kind of getting more genes now. We're getting more detail. And this is the only running reference I could squeeze into the talk. Max said I had to put a running reference in, and this is the only one I could get. But what's happening here is we're getting more data points. And so we're kind of going from a land range map to an explorer map. We're getting more detail because we've got those more points through having more patients. And this is our latest analysis. This is on 17,000 patients now. And so you've seen a lot more genes. And this is telling a story then. Each gene, we kind of know what it's doing. And what this is telling us is that there's a whole bunch of genes involved in inflammation pathways in the body, and another bunch of genes involved in viral entry into the cell and how it replicates. So it looks like the virus is getting into the cells and replicating, and we're not stopping that in people who are sick, or we're having an extreme response, an inflammation response, often in the lungs. Okay, right. So why is this important? So we can see what's happening in the body and the pathways that are involved, but why is it important? Because we can't change our genes. Okay, but what we can do is use these pathways to look at drugs. So this is our results from September 2020, within 6 months, and we found this gene here, type 2. And what we found from this analysis was that in patients who were really sick, they had more type 2 compared to people who weren't sick. And that suggested if we could reduce type 2 protein in people, that would have a positive effect. There's a clinical trial ran from Oxford called the Recovery Trial, and they were randomizing treatments into people to try and see if they had an effect. Their famous one is dexamethasone. That was their first result, and that had a massive effect in saving people's lives. They also found things that didn't have any effect or even were harmful, like hydroxychloroquine, which is what Trump got, and that has no effects. Don't take that. But from our study on type 2, we suggested that baricitinib would be a good drug of choice because that reduces type 2. And in fact, just this month, the results from the recovery trial came out, and it showed that type 2, the baricitinib could reduce death in people in hospital. Okay, so that's where we are at the moment. I'd like to thank a few people. So this is the paper that we had originally out first in September 2020. And the convention of papers is that the people who are kind of in charge get their names last. So you've got Kenny, who runs the study. But then you get all these people who kind of got the first authors, and they're involved in doing the analysis. And they're the most important authors. And on there you can see Conrad. And then there's a whole group of people, genomic investigators and ISRIC4 investigators, and there are so many there, people within hospitals around the country who are working on this project to get the results as quick as possible. There's a whole list of people on there, so I'm sure I've missed other people out as well. Okay, so I will finish there so we can get on to Sabrina. I hope that was of some interest, and thank you for your attention.
I'll unmute myself. Well, there's a first for a Carnethy with talk about genomics, which I thought we'd try and throw a spanner in the works, and you've done extremely well to do a very short talk on a very long subject, for sure. There's one thing I'd pick up is you said there that it does affect the lungs typically, but which suggests it could affect other organs in the body. Is it exclusively lung based, or does it have people had COVID that affect other organs in their body?
So work led from Edinburgh again on post-mortem show that the virus goes all around the body. It's found everywhere, but the inflammation is only in the lungs. So it really is a disease of the lungs.
Did it make a difference if you're a smoker or a
No, not hugely. No, not a huge amount of risk, or even asthma, which I was quite surprised about.
Does anyone else any questions on Lee's pretty mind-bending story?
Yes, if I may. Hi, Lee. Terrific talk. Actually, I'm going to be emailing you for the paper, but for someone who has been very active Carnethy member and has now got atrial fibrillation and other conditions keeping me off the hill. Am I more liable to suffer ill effects from COVID? I recognise this is only a probabilistic thing.
You know what? I haven't meant to say that. So, well, as long as you've been vaccinated, so you want to be vaccinated. So get vaccinated.
Yeah, all that. Have the disease, vaccinated, twice, had a booster, everything that an old man can have.
But that's great news because it's the vaccinations broke that link between the death and you know, it's, so you might get sick, but you got very much less chance of dying. And the other things that are coming along, you know, the antivirals and things like that are making a real difference. So yeah, I hope you are safe, and you know, and if you're vaccinated, then hopefully that's enough.
Thanks. But
Okay.
that's great. I'd like to look at your data in some more detail, being a chemical engineer myself. Tell us when you need chemical engineering, won't you? Doing a great job there.
Thank you.
So Lee, I've got another question. Is it possible to, if somebody has a DNA sequence, can you give a prediction as to whether they're more likely to be susceptible?
Yes, I mean, you know, within a certain framework, you could say if somebody was a bit more risk and less risk, yeah. But not enough to, you know, I don't think you go around telling people, you know, it's, yeah, I wouldn't want people isolating based on it, you know. But yes, I think yes, you can tell if somebody's more likely or not from the
But it's
gene.
still an age related. That's sort of a bigger factor, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Like your Torres del Paine, by the way. Your Torres del Paine in the background.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just had to slip in something suitable for the audience, didn't I?
Okay. Thanks, Sergey.
What about future variants of this? Because, I mean, we've had bugs for years, and this one seems to be a bit different. Does that mean that we're going to see different COVID-related variants and other things that we haven't expected? How prepared are we for what's coming?
So this pandemic was kind of predicted if you talk to the right people. It just probably wasn't high enough up on people's list of things that they needed to think about. We did have things in place that we could pull off the shelf so that we could deal with the pandemic. So it will happen again. There'll be another disease, a different disease. It might be better, it might be worse, but it will come around again. And on that happy note.
On that happy
Is that worked?
Yep, I can see it. So everyone, I'd like to introduce Sabrina, who was very kind, probably without too much, I don't know how much you know Carnethy, Sabrina, but it was very good of one of your friends who's a equally beast of a runner, Jasmine, who gave us your contact. So thank you very, very much for agreeing to do a talk to Carnethy, and it would be great to hear your story.
I'm really struggling to hear you. Sorry.
I'll just get going then.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you all. As you can see, I'm in my veterinary clothing and I'm at my veterinary practice and I'm on call. And that's what I do. Like Jasmine's also a vet. I am a small animal vet, so I do cats and dogs. And I've been doing that, I think about 13 years now. And I set up my own practice. So I'm pretty busy with that kind of thing, but I like to switch off with my running. So I consider my running a bit of meditation. And the other photo there you've got is of the beautiful Lake District. I moved up here 2013, so I've been about 9 years. And I would say that's probably stimulated me into all the mountain running. So I thought I'd just talk to you a little bit about my sporting history. I thought it was, well, you called me an astounding athlete, so that's certainly not how I see myself. In my primary school years, I was always last in every race. And my mum was, my parents were like, could you just not come last in one of your sports day races? So I certainly wasn't a gifted child in that area. And even in sort of secondary school, I wasn't very much encouraged to do sports. I was told I wasn't good enough and that I should actually just concentrate on my academic work. But when I left that school and I went to Charterhouse in Godalming, they were very encouraging, and they did all sorts of sports, and I was actively encouraged to do as much as I wanted. So I indulged myself in many different things. I did a little bit of the cross country there, but certainly not competing anything. Bit of hockey, football, anything that was going. And then after A-levels, I had a gap year, but then I went to Oxford University where I studied human sciences, and I did modern pentathlon there. When I took that up, I really just could horse ride. I suppose I could run, and I was very bad at swimming, but I got better at that. And then I learned how to shoot a pistol and also how to fence with an épée. And then I became quite good at that, and I managed to get myself a half blue for competing for Oxford University. And while I was there, I also learned how to row a boat and rowed for the Oxford Lightweights. So lots of different things. It wasn't until 2002, the London Marathon, I decided to raise money for WaterAid and run this marathon. I hadn't really done a lot of running. And they asked me to wear that costume there, dress up as a toilet. I thought that was great fun. I managed to run it in 4 hours and 24 minutes dressed as a toilet. I then moved on to, I decided I wanted to be a vet, and so I had to go back to university again. So I did 5 years at Cambridge, where I competed in triathlon, mountain biking, road cycling, continued the modern pentathlon. I found this really fun sport, adventure racing, which is probably the background to how I ended up doing the Wainwrights. Steve Birkinshaw also dabbled in adventure racing. So for those of you who haven't heard about it, it's, how do I best describe it? You get to compete normally in teams, and I was competing in teams of 4, so it'd be 3 men normally and myself. I liked the long races where we'd have like an expedition. So we'd do probably 5 days of racing continuously with no sleep. Or if you did sleep, it's in your race time. So we might have between 4 and 10 hours sleep in 5 days. And at least you had your teammates to wake you up if you were falling asleep on the bike and about to cycle off a cliff or something. So that was quite good. And then I started doing some mountain marathons, competed with my husband, Ben. So we did the OM, was my first one. We did the medium score. We quite liked the score event where you could kind of choose which checkpoints you wanted to go to. We did that one in Dartmoor, and we did all right in that. Then I did a lot more adventure racing. Oh, I can't. So I've mentioned Steve. I'd kind of seen him around at mountain marathons and in adventure racing, and he contacted me to ask me if I could help him out on the Wainwrights when he did it in 2014. I was working away in London for the week, so I was absolutely gutted that I wasn't going to be there, but we could offer him to stop in at Langdale where we lived, because it was en route, so he could have a shower and things. And Ben was in fact home, so Ben did actually support Steve on a leg out of Langdale to Rydal, which he really enjoyed, and I just remember watching his dog being very jealous. But that's when I first learnt what a Wainwright was, and it really sort of appealed to me to do this long running adventure. And I really sort of thought of it more like an adventure race than a running thing, because it's so long, and I thought about all the other components to it other than just the running. So you actually have to navigate yourself around. When you're in the hills like that, you need to look after yourself, you need to wear the right clothing, you need to keep warm, you need to keep eating, you need to drink, and you just need to keep moving. Every minute is precious, and you also do need to rest sometimes, but during that rest period, you need to be as efficient as possible. And that's certainly where I thought maybe I could have some marginal gains there. So that was kind of what stimulated me into start sort of doing these ultra running races. So my first ultra was in August 2014, so about 4 months after Steve had done the Wainwrights. And then just to show you that how I'm not quick, my first fell race was the Pike of Lisco and I came last. People always think that I should go and do these fell races, and the reason I don't is because I barely get going by the time you're all back for your cup of tea. So I stick to my long races. So these are a few of the longer races that I then competed in. I decided I liked running for a long time. After doing the 44-mile Grand Tour of Skidor, I went straight for a 100-miler in Poland and got my points for the UTMB, and I managed to get myself an elite start on the UTMB. And then I sort of thought I'd do something even longer, tried the Dragon's Back, and I really liked that race. I've done it 3 times. And all of this led to me taking on the Wainwrights challenge, really. So I shall go into that in a bit more detail. So the goal of running the Wainwrights, this massive 214 summits in one go. Here I've got 32,000 meters of ascent, but I actually added up all my own Stravas because this detail came from Steve's notes, and I actually did 36,000 meters of ascent. I don't know whether to believe my Strava watch or where these statistics came from, but you know, it's on Strava, so it's got to be real. And I thought, when I looked at it, I thought, I think I might be able to do it in under 6 days. And at that time, the current record was Paul Tierney's, which was 6 days and 6 hours. And I think people have trouble computing why I could have thought that I would be able to do it in under 6 days, because I'm not as fast a runner as Paul Tierney by any means. But I looked at how long Steve and Paul had actually spent not running, and it's quite a huge difference. So they spent about 40 hours during their 6 odd days not moving, and I only spent 10. So when you look at it like that, I had 30 hours extra to kind of play with to actually keep moving in the right direction. So to say, it wasn't about running fast, it was just the fact that I had more time to keep running. I also looked at it and I wanted to see if I could do a more efficient route. I thought Steve had probably nailed it, and that was one of the things that really appealed to me, a bit like putting a puzzle together. I really enjoyed getting out the map, and I was really fortunate Harvey Maps provided me one of these massive A1 maps of the Wainwrights route that Paul had done. And I would literally look at every section and see if I could change the route and then do it any better. And every time I changed one little section, I had to reroute a whole nother section, because you have to look at it as a whole round. So I kept taking it apart and putting it back together, but in the end, I always came back more or less to Steve's route. But I enjoyed that process, and I think I needed to do that to be sure that when I was running, I was going the quickest, the shortest way. And also, I did change a few little things which would allow me to use terrain that I was better at than, say, Steve or Paul. So I think that they're very good at running on really rough stuff, but I'm not so good. You know, I'm more of a trail runner. So the other thing was to make sure I didn't do any navigational errors, because I didn't want to spend any longer, you know, I wanted to go all the way on the right route, to not do extra time on my, probably would at one point would be tired feet. So I did lots of recce's. I think I would say by the time I did my first attempt, I'd probably been around all the Wainwrights at least 4 times, apart from Great Cock Up, because someone said to me, "You're going to leave one hill that you're not going to go and visit." And I thought, actually, that's quite a good idea. So I left Great Cock Up, because it was just an out and back. and I'd never done it before the Wainwrights, so I left that little one. And then I thought about the weather and ground conditions, and I had noted that both Paul and Steve had gone in June, left on the 21st of June around the solstice, which made a lot of sense because they had more daylight. But I had also noticed that the bracken was really high. I thought it probably doesn't affect them so much with their long legs and they can just lollop over it. But for me, when I'm quite short, I find it quite challenging to run through bracken, and it just annoys me. So I thought if I go a bit earlier when the bracken shoots are a bit shorter, that might suit me better. So I decided that maybe going in May would be a good idea. So I'd wanted to go, and we talked about COVID and how it's ruined everybody's plans, but we were in lockdown in May, so I couldn't set off in May 2020. So I just sat there and waited for the rules to change, trying to keep myself as fit as possible. And then finally, Boris announced that we could do unlimited exercise. And I took that as Boris is talking directly to me, saying, go on, Sabrina, go and do the Wainwrights. So that was it. I started at 3 AM on the 2nd of June for what I thought was, I'd looked into all the COVID rules that were there at that time. I'd had a skeletal support team, only one person on each leg, and making sure that we didn't meet up with more than 6 people in a car park, because that was the rules at the time. And I thought I'd really thought of everything. So, and I set off quite quietly. I didn't want to make a big thing of it. We didn't even share the tracker. And it started brilliantly. It was a gorgeous day, and it even got to about 27 degrees. And I know a lot of people don't like running in the heat, but it really suits me. So I was happy. But sadly, all my plans are once again ruined by COVID. When I got to Wasdale, news had reached my support team that what we were doing was illegal. And I was like, ooh, how could running be illegal now? I'm sure Boris said I could go and do this. And I wasn't quite sure why it was illegal. I thought, well, I better stop, because there's no point in, it's not worth it to become a criminal, So we stopped, and at that point at Wasdale, I was already 2 hours up on my schedule, so it was a bit gutting. But we decided to go away and pause it. I'd only done 24 hours, so my legs were still okay, and I'd wait again until Boris would maybe let me run. So 4th of July, what changed? It was this stay-at-home rule. So this was the reason I couldn't go running all night, because apparently this stay-at-home rule, I'd always thought it was just you can't go and stay at your mate's house because you might give them COVID. But in fact, it meant you actually had to stay in your own home. So you can't go running all night on the fell. You have to, at least at some point, for 1 minute of every day, that was the legal thing, you have to be in your own home for every 24 hours period, because there wasn't a curfew. So 4th of July, there was an end to that rule. So, and for everybody else, they were probably excited because the pubs were reopening. I was just excited because I get to go and run the Wainwrights. So my second attempt at running the Wainwrights was supposed to start on the 3rd of July, because I would have been leaving at 3 AM, so I would have spent 3 hours of the 3rd of July in my own home, and then the 4th of July, the rule changed. So I was going to start on the 3rd of July. But sadly, the weather was absolutely atrocious on that day. There was weather warnings of wind and rain, and we had an unprecedented amount of rain precipitation over that 48 hours. So I waited as long as I could, but given the time constraints of having to go back to work, I could only wait until Monday, the 6th of July, and start 3 AM. And the ground was absolutely sodden, so it really wasn't ideal conditions. It was still very windy, it was still very wet, and it was quite cold. Given that I like it in dry, sunny conditions, it wasn't the optimal for me. So this is a photo. Got Nikki Spinks there in the background, and Josh, who had accompanied me on this leg. This is the Scarfell leg, which is probably the biggest height gain, but it was really cold. I remember my water bottle was frozen, so it wasn't ideal. So apart from the weather not being ideal, I ended up with hurting my knee in some way. It had started to strain as I was trying to traverse the nab, and it just got worse and worse, and I didn't know what was going on particularly. It just massive amounts of swelling. And actually the knee swelling sort of precipitated into an entire body swelling, and I ended up looking a bit like Mr. Blobby's wife. I would describe it. On my last leg in on that attempt, Howard Dracup said, "Oh, you look like you're expecting twins." That's how much fluid and inflammation was happening to my body because of this knee injury. But I wobbled on round. And the other thing that I did wrong on this round was I had too little sleep. So the purpose of that round had been to test for myself, what was the minimum amount of sleep that someone could survive on for the days of doing the Wainwrights. And I only had about 6.5 hours, and that was too little. But I managed to sort of hobble my way around, and I reached Cat Bells. I think you can actually see in that photo how swollen I am, or you just think I'm fat, which is fine. But actually that's all fluid accumulation. So when I weighed myself after the Wainwrights, I was about 8 kilos heavier than when I had left. And given that I probably had lost a couple of kilos for running that long, we're probably talking about 10 kilos of water I carried around for a good couple of days of the last 2 days of the Wainwrights. The other thing about this round, I think, let me just go on to, Joss was at the end waiting for me, which I love that photo, ignoring the COVID rules at the time. But I was very honoured that he was there. But there was a little bit of controversy about me having done the round, I think. And I made the mistake, I think, of thinking that in order to claim a record, you had to announce that, you know, that you were after a record. And I hadn't, but I'd completed the round with some physical assistance to get down these hills. So when my knee hurt, I'd particularly on getting off Carl's side, it's really steep. So I couldn't bend my leg. Can't really describe. I had to turn around backwards and held on to 2 people and just sort of tottled, so I didn't topple off, I think. And so I'd done that on a few bits just to get down some of the steep stuff, you know, and that's not something you really do to try and break a record. I kind of knew that the whole round was, you know, it wasn't my best attempt at the Wainwrights. I just was going to finish it just for the sake of finishing it. I mean, it was painful, but I just managed to crawl through. But I did feel the need to address the fell running community. I think there were a couple of people who thought incorrectly. I think that they seemed to think I was cheating by leaning on someone. So I posted this out to on the Facebook community, just to say what had happened. But I was always intending to have another go to actually prove that I could do what I wanted. The first round had taken me 6 days and 18 hours, and I'd still had that sub 6 days in my head of something that I should be able to do. So what did I learn from that second attempt? I'd learnt about the season and the weather, about the ground conditions, about the sleep deprivation, that I'd really pushed it too far, that I was going to have to actually sleep a bit more in order to complete it. And I'd also not considered the kind of injury that I'd had, that maybe I needed to take better care. Well, actually what I thought is I just needed to avoid the traverse around the nab. And then the water retention, which I think in hindsight now was probably a lot to do with the injury and the sleep deprivation, and possibly periods when I may not have had enough to drink or eat. And all of these accumulations of things cause great stress on the body. And there are some good studies that have shown about water retention from having cortisol hormone. So when you're stressed, so you can actually end up retaining fluid. So I decided, you know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. So I decided to head out for a third attempt. I'd certainly managed to get leaner and fitter. If you look in this photo, you can see that I'm not as fat as you might have thought on Cat Bells the year before. So this attempt, I wanted to start in May because, of course, May is a great time of year, stable weather, but most importantly, no bracken. And I think myself and the entire support team thought, yeah, this is it. Nothing can go wrong. And I was running really well. I was really determined. I knew where I was going. I was really whizzing along, nailing the downhills because I just got a bit more practice at them with a whole year to haven't, to recce again. But about 2 days in, because of how cold the air was, the pictures look beautiful because it's clear, but I was always running in about 0 or sub-zero conditions. And it was really affecting my chest. So I am asthmatic. I take a steroid inhaler and a bronchodilator every day to control it. And I take Montelukast tablet at night, which just reduces like the kind of allergic reaction that might set me off. But the cold air, I couldn't control. It was just really making breathing very difficult. And certainly the uphills were really hard. And it just kept getting colder and colder. And I just found it harder and harder to breathe. And my respiratory rate was getting higher and higher. I was coughing a lot and wheezing. I've got a little film here to show you if I've got time, just to show you a clip of the third attempt and some of the beautiful imagery that was filmed.
This is the bog fest in here. Waist deep bog. If it's waist deep on you, that's going to be shoulder deep on Zach. So that makes it just the waist deep.
Something hot with rice. Yeah. Milk the toffee with the sugar. 5 to 10 minutes to eat. Okay. Can't see them all in that long.
I think the hardest part of these things is the road support and all the logistics around that is a real burden. So my wife's coming out to support me, similar to Sab's having her husband, and that makes a massive difference because they know you so well. So again, they know what food you want, what you need, and if you have a tantrum again, it's not too bad, hopefully.
Starting to get a bit tired, yeah. I think she needs to have a bit of sleep, really. Yeah. But she's like worried about missing out on daylight, but it's better to miss out on daylight than stay absolutely knackered, aren't you? My grandparents were part of rounds and they'd helped loads of people, so for me to be doing this and creating my own stories is very similar to the stories they've got. And I've helped on quite a few rounds now with like Paul Tierney's round. I've helped on Abraham's team in rounds to Bob Graham's to Frog Graham's, and just getting in amongst all the crack and the atmosphere is just, it's lovely to be. And some people are like, oh, why do you offer to go and run with people at stupid o'clock in the morning or, in the dead of night? And I haven't really got an answer. It's just what you do when you're a film runner, and you help people so that when you need help, they'll come and help you. And it's just the ethos of it and the atmosphere and what us film runners seem to like to do.
So do you want a couple of minutes here and then go to the next one?
Minutes, yeah. My asthma is very bad as well.
So
It's really keen my speed. Can you take my shoes and socks off for me, please?
Yeah. 1 second. Yeah, you need 5 minutes to just bounce back and then we'll give you a proper sleep. Careful.
So I'll go for it.
Yeah. We'll do those in there.
She's, very determined that she's going to do it. This is the third time we're setting off to do it now.
We'll do another dose of inhaler and then...
No more actually.
No inhaler? Okay.
So it takes some balls to want to do this 3 times. She's been to this stage before. She knows what this stage is about. She's moving better than she was last time. So it shows the strength of character and how stubborn she is that she's gonna get around.
You all ready for this?
Let's go.
See you tomorrow. Yeah.
pork pies and cake. Bye.
Right, let's go.
Right, have a good go.
Yeah. Yeah, good. My accent calmed a bit. Helps.
Just leading the way. I'm just in the hill, carrying a bag, carrying some water.
She seems to be going quite fast still. There's an area where, like on top of Stable Road, where you can pretty much see all of those fells. And you're looking now and you think, oh my God, like she's just about to go and run every single one of these. As far as your eyes can see, there's 214 of them, which some people spend a lifetime trying to do them all. So to do them all in one continuous round in under a week, I don't think I can really comprehend how much of an effort that actually is.
So yes, nice films that short daily updates that Steve Ashworth had put together, and the other team, and Matt and Ellie from Summit Fever, to put out on the dot watching page so people could see what was going on. And they focused on the support team, and I think they were a huge, had a huge input, and they make these things possible. You can see there how much they were doing for me. My husband Ben, particularly driving around with a camper van, and particularly on the third round, looking after me with my asthma, doing all sorts of things, preparing food for me, take off my shoes and socks, helping me wash the feet to keep them clean and dry, to avoid blisters and things like that. And I could have a change of clothes and replenish food and water for the hill, and lots of clothes. See, the main thing you can see from that film is just how cold it was. I was generally in 2 or 3 down jackets while running, which is chilly for what time of year that was. May. I left on the 30th of April that time, and it just got colder and colder, and my asthma just deteriorated. I just got harder and harder to breathe. I kept going, and then oops, go back one. So just to show you how cold it got, and how it was affecting my breathing and my general cardiovascular status at that point, my lips there, how blue they are, and the fact that I was actually cyanotic and my oxygen, my blood was just not saturated with enough oxygen. And then on top of that, I did keep going. I questioned my sanity at this point. And then it just really started snowing, and there was heavy snow, and the going was very, very hard. But we still, the 3 of us, Steve, well, more of us actually, Steve, Mingma, and Martin, we all carried on through the snow on the leg from Newlands Hawes into Keswick. That was the worst of it. And my breathing had just deteriorated. And I tried to sleep, and I thought I could recuperate, but my breathing didn't come back, and I just had to. This is kind of how it just deteriorated so quickly. It's just us coming off the hill. So the end of the 3rd attempt ended actually on Armboth. I did try to struggle onto Armboth. I'd done 370 kilometres out of 525 kilometres, or 159 summits out of the 214. So I was pretty vested in that round, but there was no regret in not continuing there. It wasn't possible. However, I think something inside me, whether I'm stubborn, persistent, or what it was really bugging me. I would say I was obsessed with doing the Wainwrights, and I think I just thought I couldn't understand why something always happened and I hadn't managed to make it round. So 6 weeks after that failed 3rd attempt, I set off again with my ever suffering support team. It's a running joke that I might just start another Wainwrights round. But this time you can see the weather just absolutely cracking. And without the asthma, I was able to ascend well, and my descending was good. It was tough, but this is one of the tough points that I had. One of the later legs, the one from Keswick over to Rosthwaite. This is up on Great Crag, I think. I remember that being a bit tough. But you can see we were having a good time. That was another thing that Mark mentioned when he introduced me, that I was going to talk about a lot of pain. And I certainly don't do this because it's painful. I don't think I would if I had been in a lot of pain. I actually just really enjoyed running for 6 days with loads of my friends. And I got to eat lots of cake, which just made it even better. And there's the last summit. I decided to start and finish at Langdale, which is where we were living. So this is Lingmore, and so all I had to do was run down to my home and get in the bath. And I managed to do it in 5 days, 23 hours and 49 minutes. So I achieved my sub 6 day goal. I would say a lot of that's down to the state of my feet. I think that's probably going to be a lot of people's Achilles heels on this round. I didn't have really any blisters or any problems in my feet. They looked just as good as they did when I started. So what's my secret? Well, I use waterproof socks from Deckshell, and I have really comfortable shoes. The La Sportiva Mutants, they're not a fell shoe as such, they're a trail shoe. Because of that, they have a lot more cushioning, and they're a bit wider. And I think it just allows the feet to tolerate a bit more of rock bashing, and which you're going to get on, in the Lake District. If you're doing short fell races, then you can get away with not having much padding. But if you try and run in those kind of shoes for a very long time, I think you're just really going to hurt your feet quite a lot. So a load of thank yous, particularly my husband for putting up with me 4 attempts, all of my amazing Pacers support team on every attempt. I had an amazing support road crew. I had a few sponsors as well, which helped made these films, which are really nice memorabilia. My friends and family, and the members of the public who came out to support, and of course Alfred Wainwright himself, who decided to name these peaks. So I guess if anyone wants to ask me anything, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, Sabrina, first of all, congratulations. That's 11 minutes to spare is quite a tight, quite a tight schedule. Did you kind of have any doubts in that last day whether you'd get under your 6 days?
I think that's the problem. I knew I could do it, so I wasn't in any rush. In fact, I had to tell myself when I got to the top of Lingmore, I said, actually, do you know what? I'm really going to have to get a move on now.
And did you ever bottom out? I mean, physiologically, do you kind of understand what was happening with this water retention? Well,
the interesting thing is I didn't get really much water retention at all on successful attempt on the 4th one. And so on the 2nd one, really, I think the knee injury set off a load of inflammation. And then your blood vessels get a bit leaky, so they're leaking the fluid out, and it's all just going wrong. And also, I think I didn't sleep a huge amount more in the 4th attempt. We were probably only talking about like half an hour more in 6 days, but maybe just that bit longer spent in a horizontal position allows you to equilibrate.
Okay, thank you. There's a question just coming from Kathy that flashed up there. If anyone's got questions, please ask. I'll see if I can. Oh, Kathy, would you just want to open your mic and ask your question? trying to find the question there. Hold on. Well, Kathy asks, well, tell us about your training. Just runs or strength stuff too?
So yeah, I'm a busy person. You know, I'm a vet who likes to run, not the person who runs and does a bit of vetting. So my running kind of just has to fit in around whatever I can manage to do. If I have a whole day off though, I do like just to shove my shoes on and go off and do, you know, pick up a map and just make up a route and go out for the whole day. I don't really do any training as such. I just do what I feel like when I feel like it, which is why I don't have a running coach or anything, because they just never put up with me, my lack of discipline. People always ask me, oh, how do you get yourself out the door when it's really miserable and raining? I think the answer to that is I don't. If it's really miserable and I don't want to go, I don't go. I wait till a nice day and then I'll go for a really long one. And if it's a miserable day, I might do a short one. Strength and conditioning, I'd like to think that I do. I've probably done it for a couple of weeks here and there when I thought, oh yes, I ought to do that. But that I'm not very good at sticking to it.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Mark Johnson has got a question now. We've had quite a few long distance runners speaking to us, of course, because we have some of our own. And Mark asked, do you think your approach would be sustainable for longer than 6 days? What adjustments would you need to do a Munro round?
Oh yeah, well, I thought about the Munros.
Corbett round.
Or a what round?
A Corbett round.
Oh, the Corbett round, yeah. Yeah, so I've looked at the Munros. I thought about running it all and then swimming instead of cycling and kayaking. And I thought it might take a couple of months. What would I adjust? I'd sleep more. You can't sleep as little as I did for really prolonged periods, I don't think. Although that might be an interesting experiment. I'd probably go for maybe 4 hours sleep on average a night if I was trying to run for about a month.
Yeah. I mean, Donnie Campbell talked to us about his round, which was, I mean, he got a bit of sleep, but I mean, he was 16-hour days back to back sometimes, which is bonkersly tough.
Yeah, I think I'd still be able to have less sleep than that. I mean, I think it comes down to what my everyday life is like. I don't get a lot of sleep, so I'm quite used to going without.
There's another question that I'm going to try and read. Richard Chandler, did your 3 earlier attempts lead to many tweaks or changes for your 4th attempt? So you had a 6-week gap. So did, you know, between your 3rd and 4th, but did you do a lot of tweaks at the final attempt, or were you just more fortunate with the conditions, do you think?
Oh, it's funny because I spent so long planning for the 3rd attempt. I put everything into it. I was so bored of the damn spreadsheet, but you know, I'd had this particular pacer there and this one there, and then I'd had you know, everything down to a T. But when it came to the actual 4th attempt, it was just a bit like, right, let's just go out and whoever can make it can make it. And if I can't end up with anybody on a leg, then I'll just have to take my backpack and off I go. In fact, people just mucked in, so I never ended up on my own. But there was one leg where only Al Black was with me, and I'm glad he's so strong because he carried a lot in his backpack. But I just adjusted. I thought, well, I don't need to hammer out this particular leg. I've only got one chap, so we'll just mosey on and have a good time. But saying that, yeah, I refined various things that I did. I got to know my body quite well, and to learn how to keep it fueled and to keep running at a good pace.
Excellent. Talk about fuel. I mean, did you, have a sort of fairly stable days of food? I mean, did you follow breakfast, dinner, tea, or was it just whatever you could consume when you stopped?
I ate a huge amount of Mount Fuel jellies. I'm sure they're not good for your teeth. I don't really like gels and stuff, but these particular jellies go down quite well. It was something I thought about actually, that when you're running, you don't want stuff that's hard to digest. You want to really make it as easy as for your body as possible. So I did sort of try to eat more carbs and less protein and certainly less fiber on the 4th attempt. But saying that, you just have to eat whatever you can actually make yourself eat, because you get pretty sick of food when you have to try and pummel in, you know, on about 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, more actually probably. You know, food gets a bit tedious, and I really like food normally. So I'd just eat whatever was presented. Ben was really good at just making a few different hot meals and not making too much of each one, just so that I wasn't overfazed by it. But, you know, pizza, spag bowl, lots of rice. So in the support points, I'd try and eat really well, kind of sort of higher calorie meals. And then on the hill, I'd have a lot of cake and these mouthfeel jellies, and things that are easy to eat with your hands.
So have we got any more questions while you're thinking of them? I did forget to mention that if anyone wants to make a donation to Sabrina's charity, it's called Bay Cat Rescue. I think that's correct, isn't it, Sabrina?
Yeah, it's Bay Cat Rescue, and they do a lot for me locally. You know, all this sort of stray cats. They get them neutered and sort out any illnesses or injuries that they have, and then they rehome them. So it's a nice charity that I support.
Excellent. So that's up on the chat. If it was in the Facebook post as well. I don't think I managed to put it on the email. I can't remember. I think the last question, I think, for tonight, and thank you very much to both Lee and Sabrina, but Kathy's asking, is there another route that you've got in mind? What's sort of next on your slop chit of planning and daring do's?
Well, I think I'll have to retire before I can have a go at the Monroes, because I think they'll take a couple of months. So no, I haven't got any new challenges, I don't think. I'm racing in the TDG in September, and I've got a little 100 miler in Norway, 22nd, 23rd of April. So, and then the Kong Ultra in June, which is a new race in the Lake District. But I think that's probably it this year. Nothing too exciting, I'm afraid.
Well, if you do fancy popping up into Scotland anytime and doing anything, do get in touch with the club, Carnethy. We've got a few people who've done a few of the routes up around here if you need support. So
lovely, thank you.
But I think I'd like to thank you guys again for totally different talks, but a great finish to the winter series. So I think on behalf of everyone in Carnethy, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been interesting.
If there's any other questions, we can hang on and people can open their mics, but otherwise we will sign off in a few minutes. And thanks again, Sabrina.
Thanks, good night.